If a man is on your mind all the time, these 7 things are already happening to him. Inspired by Carl Jung's wisdom for soulmate love. Dear beautiful soul, from the bottom of my heart, wish and hope you learn some knowledge from this lesson. If a man is on your mind all the time, these 7 things are already happening to him and enable you connect to your energy of soulmate love attraction. This is because you deserve the best, deeper love and relationships. Maybe you wish to share your wisdom or experience with us. Feel free to put it in the comment section. Let's continue inspire and learning from each other. Thanks for watching. Kindly subscribe and support to keep more of such soulmate connect wisdom. Thus, let's explore together in depth this lesson. If a man is on your mind all the time, these 7 things are already happening to him. Carl Jung. There are moments in life when someone enters your mind so deeply that it almost feels impossible to escape them. You wake up thinking about him. You replay conversations while driving, working, or sitting alone at night. Sometimes it feels comforting, other times exhausting. But no matter how hard you try to focus elsewhere, your attention quietly returns to him again and again. Most people will immediately tell you the same thing. You're overthinking, you're attached, you need to move on. But what if the truth is more complicated than that? Carl Jung believed that human connection operates on levels far deeper than ordinary logic. According to Jung, many of the most powerful emotional experiences do not begin consciously. They emerge from the unconscious mind, the hidden part of us that quietly shapes attraction, longing, intuition, and emotional recognition. And this is where things become interesting, because sometimes when you cannot stop thinking about someone, it is not simply obsession. Sometimes your mind is responding to a psychological and emotional imprint that has already begun forming between 2 people. Not fantasy, not magic, but a deep emotional resonance, the kind that changes both people long before either of them fully understands what is happening. The first thing that often begins happening to a man when he constantly occupies your thoughts is this. He starts revisiting moments involving you when you are no longer around. This happens more often than most women realize. Men process emotional experiences differently. While many women feel emotions in real time, men frequently understand their feelings later. After distance and reflection, at first, he may not notice anything unusual. He may continue with his routine, his work, his distractions. But slowly, something starts replaying in his mind. Maybe it is the way you laughed at something small. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That is exactly what happens here. Maybe it is the calmness he felt around you. Maybe it is a conversation that seemed ordinary at the time but suddenly feels meaningful later. The emotional effect you had on him begins working beneath the surface before he fully recognizes it consciously. And this is why men sometimes appear emotionally delayed, not because they do not feel deeply, but because they often need solitude to understand what they feel. Imagine a man leaving a crowded room after speaking to dozens of people. Most conversations disappear from his mind within minutes. But one interaction stays. Yours. Days later, he still remembers the energy of it, without fully understanding why. That is how emotional imprinting begins. The second thing already happening to him is emotional contrast. Without realizing it, he starts comparing how he feels around you to how he feels everywhere else. This is subtle at first. Maybe his usual conversations begin feeling empty. Maybe distractions that once entertained him suddenly feel less satisfying. Maybe he notices that being around you creates a sense of emotional ease he cannot find elsewhere. Jung believed that soulmate-like connections often awaken hidden parts of the self. In psychology, this is sometimes connected to what he called the anima, the unconscious feminine energy within a man. When a man encounters someone who deeply resonates with his inner world, it can feel both magnetic and unsettling at the same time. Why? Because real connection forces self-awareness, and self-awareness changes people. Think about someone who spent years emotionally disconnected from himself, focused only on success, routine, and external goals. Then, suddenly, one person makes him feel emotionally present again. That experience stays with him, even if he tries to ignore it, even if he cannot explain it. The third thing happening is that he becomes mentally distracted by you in unexpected moments, not constantly, not obsessively, but in fragments. A song reminds him of you. A random memory surfaces while he is working. Something you once said suddenly makes sense days later. This is important because genuine emotional attachment rarely arrives dramatically. It builds quietly through repetition. One memory becomes several. One thought becomes a pattern. And before he fully realizes it, your presence has entered his internal world. This is where many women become confused because externally he may still appear calm or unchanged, but internally something is shifting. And Jung understood this deeply. He believed the unconscious communicates through symbols, emotions, patterns, and recurring thoughts long before conscious understanding catches up. In other words, a man may think he is simply thinking about you sometimes, while, emotionally, his mind is already reorganizing around your presence. The fourth thing happening to him is emotional caution. This surprises many people. When feelings become stronger, men do not always move closer immediately. Sometimes they become quieter first, more observant, more careful. Why? Because emotional importance creates vulnerability. The moment someone starts mattering deeply, the risk of loss also appears. And many men are not trained to process vulnerability openly. Instead, they slow down internally, while trying to understand what they are feeling. This is why mixed signals can sometimes appear during genuine emotional connection. One day, he seems highly engaged. The next day, distant. Not because the feelings disappeared, but because he is trying to make sense of emotions that feel unfamiliar or unexpectedly powerful. Think about a man standing at the edge of deep water for the first time. He feels drawn toward it, but also cautious of how deep it goes. That hesitation is not always disinterest. Sometimes it is emotional depth, revealing itself slowly. The fifth thing already happening is increased awareness of your absence. This is one of the clearest signs of emotional significance. When someone begins occupying a meaningful place in a man's inner world, your absence becomes emotionally noticeable. Not dramatically, quietly. Your silence feels different. Your distance feels heavier. The energy shifts when you are not there. And this is where many connections deepen the most, not during constant interaction, but during space, because space forces reflection. Jung believed that longing often reveals hidden truths about attachment and emotional need. When someone leaves an emotional imprint on us, distance does not erase it immediately. In many cases, it sharpens awareness of it. This is why some men only fully understand what they feel after separation. Silence or time apart. Suddenly, the emotional contrast becomes impossible to ignore. What once felt ordinary now feels missing, and that realization quietly changes how he sees you. But here is the important truth. None of this automatically guarantees love. It does not guarantee commitment, and it does not mean every intense emotional experience is mutual, because sometimes the mind can create emotional loops around uncertainty. That is why awareness matters more than fantasy. A real connection eventually moves beyond thought and into reality. It becomes visible through consistency, effort, presence, and emotional clarity. And in Part R, we are going to explore the final 2 signs that reveal whether this connection is genuinely mutual or whether your mind is holding on to something that exists more strongly in imagination than in reality. Because once you understand the difference between emotional obsession and authentic soulmate connection, you stop chasing confusion and start recognizing what is truly meant for you. By now, you've probably realized something important. Thinking about someone constantly is rarely just about thoughts alone. Beneath the surface, something deeper is usually happening emotionally, psychologically, sometimes even spiritually. But Carl Jung warned about something many people ignore. Not every intense feeling is a true connection. Sometimes the mind mistakes emotional tension for destiny. And that distinction changes everything. Because when a connection is real, it eventually leaves evidence in reality. It moves beyond imagination, beyond endless analyzing, beyond emotional guessing. It becomes visible through actions, consistency, and emotional presence. Which brings us to the 6th thing already happening. To him, if this connection is genuine, he begins unconsciously prioritizing you. This rarely happens in dramatic ways at first. It starts subtly. He responds faster than usual. He remembers details you casually mentioned weeks ago. He notices shifts in your mood without being told. And perhaps most importantly, he begins making emotional space for you in his life. Carl Jung believed that meaningful relationships activate parts of ourselves we have neglected or hidden. In soulmate-like connections, people often begin reorganizing their priorities without consciously deciding to do so. Why? Because emotional investment naturally redirects attention. Think about someone planting a tree in a quiet corner of their yard. At first, they barely notice it, but over time, they begin checking on it daily, watering it, protecting it, watching it grow. Attention follows emotional significance. The same thing happens in human connection. A man who once guarded his time carefully may suddenly find himself wanting to hear your voice after a long day. A man who rarely opens up emotionally may start sharing thoughts he normally keeps hidden. A man who once enjoyed constant independence may begin imagining you inside his future plans without fully realizing it. This is one of the strongest signs that a connection is becoming emotionally real. Not words, not chemistry, not intensity, priority, because people naturally make room for what deeply matters to them. And this is where many women finally begin sensing the difference between fantasy and reciprocity. Real emotional connection creates movement toward you, not just attraction from a distance. The seventh thing happening to him is emotional awakening. This is the stage where a man slowly stops seeing the connection as casual and starts recognizing that it is changing him internally. And this can feel uncomfortable at first. Jung believed that love has a strange way of confronting people with parts of themselves they have avoided. Real connection acts almost like a mirror. It reflects not only desire, but wounds, fears, insecurities, and emotional needs that usually stay hidden beneath daily life. That is why genuine love often feels both beautiful and unsettling, because it forces growth. Imagine a man who spent years emotionally detached, always staying in control, never allowing himself to need anyone deeply. Then, suddenly, someone enters his life who makes emotional vulnerability feel unavoidable. At first, he may resist it. He may become inconsistent. He may retreat emotionally while trying to regain control over what he feels. But internally, something has already changed. This is why Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Real love does not only awaken happiness, it awakens awareness. A man who truly feels connected to you eventually begins confronting himself differently. He notices his emotional patterns. He questions old behaviors. He becomes more aware of what fulfills him emotionally and what leaves him empty. And slowly, your presence becomes associated with emotional truth, not perfection. Truth. That is why soulmate connections often feel transformative. They do not simply add excitement to life. They change the way people see themselves. But now we arrive at the most important part of all. How do you know whether this is real connection or simply emotional obsession? Because the truth is, both can feel incredibly intense. Both can consume your thoughts. Both can create emotional longing. But there is one major difference between them. Obsession creates anxiety. Connection creates clarity. Obsession keeps you trapped in uncertainty. It forces you to constantly analyze small details, search for hidden meaning, and chase reassurance that never fully satisfies you. Connection feels different. Even when it is quiet, there is emotional steadiness underneath it. You do not feel like you are forcing everything forward mentally. Instead, the relationship gradually begins revealing itself naturally through mutual effort and consistency. Carl Jung understood something powerful about the human psyche. The mind desperately tries to complete what feels unfinished. That is why emotionally unavailable people often become obsessive attachments. The uncertainty itself creates psychological tension. Your mind keeps returning to them, searching for resolution. But unresolved tension is not the same as love. And this is where many people lose themselves. They mistake emotional intensity for emotional alignment. Think about chasing a horizon while walking through a desert. No matter how far you go, the horizon keeps moving further away. Obsession works the same way. It promises emotional completion while constantly withholding it. Real connection does not behave like that. It moves toward mutual understanding. It becomes clearer over time, instead of more confusing. A man who genuinely feels emotionally connected to you eventually becomes more consistent, not less. More intentional, not more distant. More emotionally present, not emotionally unavailable. Because authentic emotional connection naturally seeks expression. It wants to be lived, not endlessly imagined. And this is why your focus should never remain only on your feelings. Look at reality. Does he make an effort to stay connected? Does he create emotional safety? Does he move toward clarity? Does his behavior align with the emotional weight you feel internally? Because no matter how powerful a connection feels inside your mind, genuine love eventually shows itself externally. It leaves evidence. And this is the lesson so many people learn too late. You cannot think a relationship into existence. You cannot love someone hard enough to create reciprocity where none exists. You cannot build emotional reality purely through fantasy, intuition, or longing. At some point, reality must meet emotion. And when it does, things become surprisingly simple. You stop obsessing over hidden meanings because actions speak clearly enough on their own. You stop chasing certainty because consistency provides it naturally. You stop losing yourself in emotional confusion because genuine connection no longer feels one-sided. This is why self-awareness matters so much. The next time someone occupies your mind constantly, pause before immediately romanticizing the feeling. Instead, ask yourself, is this connection bringing peace into my life, or only emotional chaos? Is it helping me grow, or keeping me emotionally trapped? Am I seeing clear movement toward me, or only creating stories inside my own mind? Because awareness changes everything. The moment you stop feeding fantasy and start observing reality clearly, your emotional world becomes calmer, wiser, and far more powerful. And according to Carl Jung, that is where real transformation begins. Not when you lose yourself inside emotion, but when you finally understand it. Because true soulmate love does not require endless confusion to survive. It reveals itself naturally through mutual presence, emotional honesty, consistency, and growth. And once you experience that kind of connection, you no longer need to chase signs. You simply recognize what is real. Here's a strong concluding section you can use to close the video. Naturally and emotionally. In SUMMARY. So, if a man has been on your mind constantly lately, don't rush to label it as fate. But don't dismiss it either. Sometimes, the mind holds on to someone because there is something unresolved. Other times, it's because a real emotional connection is quietly forming beneath the surface. And according to Carl Jung, the most powerful connections often begin long before either person fully understands them consciously. But here's what truly matters. Real connection eventually becomes visible, not just through feelings, fantasies, or late-night overthinking, but through consistency, effort, emotional presence, and clarity. A man who genuinely feels your impact will slowly begin showing it in the way he remembers you, prioritizes you, responds to your energy, and moves toward you emotionally. Because true soulmate energy does not leave you trapped in endless confusion. It brings awareness. It brings growth. And over time, it brings truth to the surface. So instead of asking, "Why can't I stop thinking about him?" maybe the better question is, "What is this experience trying to teach me about love, connection, and myself?" Because the moment you stop chasing certainty inside your thoughts and start paying attention to reality, everything changes. You stop forcing meaning where there is none. You stop confusing obsession with connection. And you finally create space for the kind of love that feels mutual, peaceful, and real. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And sometimes, the people who enter our minds most deeply are not only here to awaken love, but to awaken us. If this message spoke to you, take a moment to reflect on your own experience. And remember, what is truly meant for you will never require you to lose yourself just to hold on to it. Dear beautiful soul, we have come to the end of our lesson. Hope you have learned something from this topic. If a man is on your mind all the time, these 7 things are already happening to him. And from the bottom of my heart, wish that the wisdom from this lesson enables you connect deeply with your soulmate love, because you deserve the best, deepest relationship. Maybe you wish to share your wisdom or experience with us. Free to put it in the comments section. Let's continue, inspire, and learning from each other. Kindly subscribe and support to keep more of such Soulmate Connect. Thanks for watching.